Welcome to Personnel Record 5. I am Obelisk of Malice, your eternally lazy and flaky host as always. I have an excuse though. I have an excuse. I've been moving people into the station and checking on a few ongoing tests elsewhere outside of here of the station. Yes. Okay. So, as promised, I do have the permission from my nieces and nephews to share their stories. However, my current issue is that I decided to drop each of them and record that. And those recordings span well over 6 hours each. So cut up and sped to 20 times faster, roughly. Each one still verges on 20 minutes each. And if I make them any faster, who knows what will happen. I mean, the whole thing is already going fast. It's as if, bam, lines are light, and bam, 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 we got eyes on it, that happened. Nobody knows, it's a mystery. So, if there's an outline and all of a sudden there's color, just know it is me trying to save you time of watching me struggle to fill in my paint by number I made myself. You're very welcome. Now, since I got all of that cleared up, back to what I was alluding to. I was hoping to do this in 2 to 3 short videos to get everyone covered and such, but I really don't believe anyone wants to sit there for over an hour straight listening to me talk about these kiddos. I'm sorry, it's just how the Malice rolls. I don't want to sit there talking for an hour straight. So, there will be about 2 per video, and I'm averaging about 3 to 4 videos to get everyone covered. And that's because I have other things going on, and I may or may not work on some data records as well. I mean, there's been so much cooking that I don't know. Kind of need to go over it all before I get swept up in the eternal chaos that is the space station. Alright, so the final thing. Yes, I apologize. This introduction is long, but there's a lot to cover, a lot to catch you up on, you know? All of my nieces and nephews will appear largely different compared to myself or any other members of my species. This is due to being born and raised outside of our home planet, causing some changes. They've all been raised by the matriarch tetrarch, my eldest sister, and therefore have been stabilized to an extent, but it appears that, like myself, they are constantly changing. I mean, that's alright, aren't we all? Okay, alright. Intro done, I promise. On to the first of the babies. Verilith is, well, she's mainly aquatic based, to state the obvious. And I'd like you all to know that drawing poses for anything in the water is incredibly difficult. Even a wiggly long dragon-shaped eel thing like her is just chaos trying to balance the weight while making her look weightless while also not ruining any sense of gravity the viewer might have in relation to the art. It's so fun. Hence why we start with a more complete sketch laid out instead of starting with the dreaded blank page. Verilith hails from a colony planet that boasts its underwater mining riches, mainly in the form of fossil fuels and precious minerals used for creation of more complicated machinery, such as the drives powering most of our larger fleets. Normally, colonists are made to return home upon becoming childbound so the egg may develop and hatch on the home planet, where various factors such as radiation and nuclear energy is handled with care and wholly understood. For example, our power plants for the home planet, at least before I left, were kept a certain distance away from civilized areas. I believe around 2 motherships in length. Don't blame me. I heard someone use it once and now it's stuck in my head. I can't describe it in any other way. Background aside, Verilith's parents, as a product of the pressures of their hands-on jobs in the deeper areas of the ocean, felt unable to leave in fear of risking their positions and livelihoods. Most places, if not all, have issues such as this, and my species is no different. Not to mention the general environment, both physically and mentally over there, is pretty rough, to say the least. So when Verilith was born, it was with what was, and still is by most, to be deformities. Larger eyes, no legs, a long, trailing body, and a connection to forces still misunderstood at a young age. I have yet to hear much else about her childhood, seeing as the matriarch rescued her from the others in the midst of a large-scale mining operation. It had destroyed so much of the remaining natural habitat in the area, it was forcing her out of hiding and into the nets of some very scared food collectors tasked with getting the food for the entire colony. They usually do this by using sweep nets, and these sweep nets have very tiny holes to catch absolutely everything, because with the large-scale environmental destruction, they were finding it difficult to find sustainable food sources outside of eating absolutely anything. Especially with how large their operation was, that's a lot of people. After some testing of Verilith's DNA was done back at the home planet, Verilith was adopted by and turned into one of the founding soldiers by the Tetrarch. Now, don't get me wrong, we did have what were essentially soldiers for exploits out in the unmapped cosmos, especially when it came to dealing with the Mawaks. But they have other names. I really can't be bothered to remember those names because they're all diluted phrases skipping around the murder part of the job. However, seeing as Verilith and the following nieces and nephews were trained to protect the Tetrarchs by any means necessary, the previous holdups around our naming conventions were tossed. So we took a note from the Book of Humans and just sprinkled in a little bit of murder in there. It's pizzazz, a woo. Because we love to pretend we are a peace-faring species that preaches love and communication, which is shit, I will have you know, no one really practices our ideologies aside from the Matriot Tetrarch. Alright, so now I know you're wondering what Verilith is like and how she has moved into the station if she stays in the water. Well, she is actually the chief in charge of Damn. I never named them, did I? I am just realizing that there was one of the first records I made. There was a species I was conducting updates on semi-regularly as to my intervention in their evolution. 000G something, I think. I'll try to connect the videos with them if possible via a link in the description. Verilith is in charge of keeping tabs on them, if that makes any sense. She is to stay out of sight, seeing as she can blend in pretty well with deeper waters and is a master of illusion. She sends me regular updates on the things. You know what I'm talking about. Seeing as Verilith was the founding soldier for the Tetrarchs and the one who was expected to keep the rest in charge, she does have a bit of eldest child syndrome. She's calm, confident, and smart, but also a bit mothering and constantly anxious about the rest of the soldiers. I have my hands full just ensuring she's getting the help and medication she needs, not to be withering away from just stress. Speaking of which, I actually developed some medications that are not approved by any sort of doctor. I want to make that clear. But they seem to be working, so hey, all's well that ends well. At least I hope that's the correct saying. Anyway, I have a plan on having a friend of mine get a doctor to check them for her at some point anyway. Some point close in the future, because I do not want to ruin her health. Anyway, regardless, the point of this medication is more about handling the symptoms rather than the root cause, seeing as the root cause is less of a hormone imbalance or the such, which I can probably fix with medication, but this is more of a mental thing. Not that it being mental makes it any less valid or real. I'm looking at you, Mono. I will get you on antidepressants one day, mark my words. Back to the topic at hand. I will say the anxiety medication seems to be working well, paired with counseling and regular calls from the other soldiers and myself. I also do my best to send pictures of the others down with the assistants when they restock supplies for Verilith. I did want to point out a couple other physical details of Verilith's before moving on though. Yes, I am aware I'm jumping around. Do forgive me for remembering to give you context. The spikes on Verilith seem to have very little in the way of functional use, as far as I can tell right now. And with the understanding of the tall straight spires and thin vegetation in the environment she called home for so much of her adolescence, I suppose it does make quite a bit of sense for her to have grown spikes to break up her larger, smooth form. Kind of like baby deer having spots on them to blend in. I don't know. So she looks less like a sleeping mound of animal and more like a mound of rock with some spires or vegetation from a far distance. Up close, the illusion is easily broken. The issue is that with the rapid evolution stemming from being born off homeworld, there is no lineage or context of species evolution to look to for clues. Not even another, Verilith to compare to. I work with an extremely small data sample when making assumptions about the soldiers and their physical attributes. If you have any suggestions or observations, I would love for you to let me know. I always love hearing from people. The second thing to notice is the existence of her long claws. I'm not the best example of normal hands, however, I do not have daggers for fingers like Verilith. Those things be sharp. Not only that, but her arms themselves appear to be armored through thick sandpaper-like skin, similar to that of sharks or marlin, I suppose. It is thick, tough, and it hurts like nothing else to scrape up against with just bare skin. Like if you had to run some sandpaper down your bare skin, her skin could easily shred the outer layers of your epidermis off. Her arms in general seem to be built for taking on larger prey despite her penchant for fish and squid. Perhaps there's something she's not telling me, but it does seem rather odd that such a large young lady like herself sustains solely off of small prey. The function of the indents along her side and under her spikes are still unknown to me, and they were the power I was alluding to earlier. Perhaps they are part of camouflage and are meant to mimic something in her natural environment, quote unquote. But from my experimentation of pictures of her home planet, there doesn't seem to be much of any natural or animal-made landmarks that resembles these markings. My only other assumption is that they have to do with her ability to breathe underwater, like fish do. She doesn't have any obvious gills, however I have noticed gill-like formations under her spinal plates. Perhaps the indents of her sides are part of a second stage process in regards to that. I would dissect her to figure out more, but as it stands, I'd rather not traumatize and risk harming my niece. Science can wait in the face of peoples I likes. Maybe if she pisses me off. I'm just kidding, I promise. To end this section, Verilith is a reliable person I can trust to handle herself in the face of adversity. She is kind, loving, and will do whatever it takes to help and protect those that need it. She has no qualms about speaking her mind. I can trust her to always tell the truth, which is rare these days, I think. She is overall just a lovely lady and absolutely deserves the best I can give her. I only plan on letting her stay here long enough for her to process and understand the disappearance of the tetrarch so she can move to new horizons and grow into the person I know she can be. Because staying here with me will only stifle her in the long run. Until then, a support net doesn't hurt with helping her. Anyway, onto the art itself. Seeing as I've gone over Verilith herself, the shading for this isn't quite what I would want. I couldn't decide if she was in shallow water or deep water, and that overall made the direction of everything relatively random. However, I give myself quite a bit of credit for even the nonsense shading because it still is the light is still coming from above. There is still a sense of form, I think, and overall compared to my earlier drawings on this channel, feel I've made some progress, especially with how long between videos it takes me to do stuff. And I do believe we're coming to the end of it. I don't remember if I shaded the fish or not. The fish were less there as part of it and more as background objects to fill in the space, because it was a lot of empty space. I don't know if you noticed, it was just blue. Pure blue. What it was gonna be. So, oh, I do shade them. Okay, that's nice. Who knew? Anyway, I overall love Verilith, and I hope this drawing does her some semblance of justice. Oh yeah, here we go. Had to add on my signature post-production accent. Whoopsies. Now on to Verilith's second half, of whom is Torigul, my darling little man. They've been close for many years upon meeting at the homeworld. Verilith, of course, took Torigul under her wing, ensuring the little dude had someone to support him that knew what they were actually doing. Since we went in half blind for Verilith, and ever since, Verilith and Torigul have sort of been boss and assistants, with Torigul doing what Verilith can't on land. Torigul, however, is more electronically inclined, and at the moment is working to keep an eye on the bowels of the station with some of the younger assistants. He is a wonderful teacher, and has more patience than I think even Verilith could muster with so many younglings running around. He's a wonderful introduction to the world of engineering and science, along with being a handy eye on what goes down there, since I don't bother to check the bowels around here often due to my schedule, so with classes happening down there so often, we're sure to catch anything suspicious before it becomes a problem. Torigul is a very bright individual, though he is pretty racked with enough self-doubt to feel a man dude bro podcast, if you know what I mean. He has done some stuff to streamline some of our processes, along with freeing older assistants from babysitting duty, due to the classes that he's staging down in the bowels of the station. Is really handy because the younger assistants get something to do, and I don't have to worry about what they're getting up to with him, since he's a pretty responsible young man. And beyond his babysitting abilities, he is one of my best inventors in his own right. The Mawaks, the assistants, are of course clones of the same person, and despite my best effort to allow for variability, there is only so much that can change between them. And I am really only one person, and the test subjects are zero help. Who knew? So having a fresh mind with fresh ideas is, well, a breath of fresh air. Seeing as he focuses mainly on tools and defensive measures, we can cover more areas of interest beyond my interest in weapons and, well, it's classified. I'm not gonna tell you. As you can see, Torigul does have some mechanical parts about him, along with a tank. This is because he hails from a planet with a different makeup of oxygen, and he, like Verilith, was born, well, I suppose, hatched and raised on that planet. He evolved features that strangely remind me more of the assistants than my own species, particularly those ears. And his limbs are resemblant of my own, which are incorporeal. Please don't ask, I've yet to figure it out myself. I got the hands, and he got the hands, but he doesn't have the rest of the body, and I don't, like, I can form my own hands and arms with whatever the hell I'm made up of, but Torigul has hands and feet with actual forms at the ends, and has issues in accurately replicating the, like, middle part of the functional limbs despite his best effort, particularly the joints region, because that's a really complicated area to be focusing on all day long. So to help in his mobility and confidence, he and I worked together quite a few years ago when he first came to home planet on a metal skeleton, so to say. The core in the center of his metal chest is what keeps his limbs working, as well as all the checks and balances we input, so the whole thing can keep an eye on itself and filter the air of his tank wherever to fail, which it hasn't quite yet. My favorite detail, though, are the screens on his shoulders. As some of you may know, it is difficult to express emotions with facial expressions with a mask covering half of your emoting area, like with myself. So the screen on his shoulders is Torigul's way of communicating his emotions and mood. I myself have to resort to exaggerated body movements to get my point across, as well as a fluctuating voice, because otherwise I'm monotone and nobody understands, and I'm so my. So usually Torigul's screens are smiley faces in various states of smiling or frowning. Sometimes you see the occasional face I know were drawn by Torigul himself versus something more computer generated. I can't describe what they look like due to being on, so they're very specific. And do know that they are more informative than even if I could see his face. Maybe I should make my own screens, seeing as my face is also covered. Might be something to think about, I suppose. I don't know if I can be bothered, though. Regardless, within the soldiers, Torigul is less of a babysitter or mother figure, and more of a voice of reason, being the one with the best sense of right and wrong. That's the way you should say it. The others being more animalistic in their truest nature. Verilith herself has attempted to eat someone before. Don't really know why I forgot about that. The only reason she didn't is due to Torigul's insistence on not wanting to bail her out of jail or watch her execution. Good on him. Another example would be of Serenora attempting to dig a hidey hole for her food, being thwarted by Torigul insisting she eat everything she's given. Though that might be due to some previous circumstances of hers. I've yet to figure it out. We'll talk about that whenever she comes up. So regardless, Torigul is far more focused on the pursuit of peace and love than even the matriarch tetrarch and all her nonsense about treaties. I mean, Torigul is really her son in quite a few moral senses, I believe. Though I greatly regret never bringing him to any discussions with the other species, as he is very convincing in the best way. He's also a wonderful listener. I could be swayed to think I have a bias, though, seeing as he is my adorable little nephew, of whom I adore greatly and would wreck the day of anyone who dared ruin his. I think I've just convinced myself of my own bias. I think I got sidetracked. Let's see. I do want to talk about Torigul's form for just a tad, seeing as he is so reminiscent of what the priest had told me are mercenaries, quote-unquote, from her species. The Moaks apparently have a specific Moak, or Moakses, chosen through being born with a certain mutation that alerts nearby Moaks with the same mutation of their existence, being raised by the closest of these mutated Moaks into what they call a mercenary. I can't get into it right now. It's not only is the logic of this entirely inane, but to think that this is protected by the law. What I am attempting to get at is that apparently along with the mutation that causes this odd attraction phenomena, we'll call it, these mercenaries are often also born with various other mutations, such as furred tails, which is uncommon, horns on their head, such as the one Torigul has on his forehead, spidery limbs, double-jointed legs, a bit like a deer, and special adaptations, quite a bit like Torigul. He doesn't have the spider limbs, though. I find that also just bonkers. To be born with the limbs, reminiscence of another species entirely, from another planet, in another solar system. I just forget it. Stupid. The conclusion is that I do find the similarities between Moaks and their mercenaries and Torigul to be eerie, along with his ears, which are very, very similar to the ears that most Moaks apparently have. There are these fuzzy, furry, triangle type things, except Toriguls aren't very furry or super triangular like the priest was describing. This whole thing is just giving me a headache. I'm not too sure if I can be bothered to think about it further, seeing as Torigul is already on the case of figuring all this out, and I want to give him the room to learn and explore on his own. Regardless, Torigul seems fit for a gravity similar to that of the station in my home planet, along with being on land due to having legs, which is great considering his interests. Though it seems his parents may have had him scrounge for research materials within the confined recesses of the mountains of his home planet due to how often he crouches and slouches. It seems to be a bit more extreme than normal slouching of a growing boy, and he seems a bit too comfortable in positions like this drawing for me to believe this comes from growing awkwardness. I think he's done growing now too. I think. Maybe. I'm waiting a bit longer before I make claims like that due to the limited knowledge of those born off home planet due to it being outlawed. Specifically because of cases like this, as you can see. Anyway, his smaller than normal eyes suggest he was scrounging for the crystals being gathered from his home planet, being experimented on for the potential use as an alternative form of energy. They tend to glow with reserved power upon being touched in any way, meaning that he'd have little to use for being able to see in the dark when everything is so bright with crystals. His lacking abdomen is, I don't know what to assume about it. His limbs, sure, I can compare them to my own arms. His abdomen, I mean, how does he eat? It just goes down there and exits, and he refuses to specify. I'm not about to lock up my own nephew for observation yet. I mean, we'll see if that changes depending on just how curious I get and if this proves to be troublesome for him long term in the future, specifically medically wise. If he seems to be having trouble with digestion or keeping nutrients, I may be forced to take extreme measures. In the meantime, I can be satiated with what little information we get as he ages and continues to interact with new things due to his position assisting the assistants and myself. I have high hopes for my little baby boy creator. Oh, he should clear out an area for his own office. Oh, it takes so much work. I don't know where to even put it. Anyway, so going on to this specific drawing of mine, I wanted to depict him in his most natural state, being that of crouching and doing something on his screens. I don't really know what he does on those screens. I know he has maps of the station. I know he has different blueprints for different areas. Oh, and there's the colors I mentioned before. But I don't really know what else he uses it for. Maybe he's gaming while he's teaching the Mohawks, and they just don't realize it, so they never report back to me. It's whatever, he can do what he wants. I just appreciate the help. But I wanted the lighting in this one to be more dramatic, because while the bows of the ship aren't meant to be scary or anything, they're certainly not nearly as well lit as the rest of the station. That's partly because I just couldn't be bothered to put lights in there when I knew I wouldn't be going down there for very long. And it's also partially due to a lot of the heavy machinery being kept down there, so it's pretty hot. And I want to limit what other heating factors are in there. So lights, of course, make light and heat because they're off-putting energy, and I've yet to refine that into just pure light. So limiting the number of lights will usually limit the amount of heat, hopefully, considering how large the space station is. Even if the lights are like 10% heat or even 5% heat, that is still a lot and dangerous around the machinery that keeps the space station up and running. I also wasn't exactly sure how to shade his incorporeal bits, because They're a bit see-through, but they also have some substance, and it's a bit confusing to be like, oh, do I light it? Do I light it separately? Do I just blur it? I don't know. So I distracted myself with his tail for a bit, as you can see, before getting back to the legs. Because there was also a lot of metal. There's a lot of metal on his feet. He likes to have something heavy to keep his feet grounded. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of metal on him. Maybe I should talk to him about switching to other materials for some of his outfit. I feel like that'd make him a lot more comfortable. Maybe we need to change his skeleton. I don't know. It's been a while since we updated that. Regardless, Torigul loves the color green. His hair is, of course, pretty bright green. It's not less bright and more light green, if that makes sense. Kind of like off-white, if you know what I mean. Off-white doesn't glow, it's just light. So here we are taking out all the other layers so I can blur the layers I was working on and not get confused with what is what, because if you have 4 or 5 layers of shading, after a while it gets confusing about which parts are what and what needs to be shaded. And so you end up just going around the layers and being like, are you the one I want to use? Are you the one I want to use? Or do I want to use you? I don't know. I'm so confused. So this entire drawing was a bit annoying overall, but I do love the boy, so of course I'm gonna give the boy my best effort. I believe we're coming up on the last bits of shading. For the background is a lot more simple because there's a lot less detail, so I kind of just scribble. And there we go. There's the boy. I love him very much. The baby. Well, I suppose that wraps things up for now. There are still questions, of course, and still things to address, but unlike my normal personnel records or my data records, this video and the ones introducing the rest of the soldiers are meant more as well. An introduction than anything, less about what they are and more about who they are, if that makes sense. Just like with introducing Alpha and her sisters, I intend to reference them all in the future and feel as though everyone should have the required context to understand what it is I'm talking about. Before I send off, if anyone could tell me the obsession with animals sitting upon the lap, I look down and boom, animal on my lap. How? I'm gonna lock the bastards out of my office at this point with how often they are sneaking their little booties up for snuggles. So, if there are any questions, feel free to ask them. I might not be on here often, but I do love to hear from people. So, I thank you very much, all of you, for returning to my ramblings. It has been an absolute pleasure making one of these again, and I hope to hear from anyone willing to speak with me. I will try to keep an eye out for the comments, of course, but seeing as my hope has always been to spark curiosity in people. Have a pleasant day, all of you. I shall see you again at some point. Hopefully. I haven't even started on the next one. Oh boy. Okay. Goodbye.